Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Today I'm going to be doing sort of my early impressions on the basic fantasy role-playing game. So I got this just a couple of days ago, and I haven't really had a chance to thoroughly read through it yet, but I have had chances to kind of flip through some things, and it is really interesting to me so far. I'm not going to be doing the flip through of this book in this video, unlike other early impressions videos, because I actually want to save the flip through for the actual review for this particular product, which should be coming out, I'd say, hopefully sometime next week. So, one of the first things that I really want to say that's really awesome about this product is the fact that it is sold at the printing costs. So it's not exactly, like a for-profit kind of thing, which is kind of refreshing given, the way that most RPG products have kind of slowly just kind of kept creeping up in prices as the years go on. Dungeons & Dragons is a pretty prime example of price inflation from what it was just a few years ago to now. So to have these things being produced and sold at just the cost to produce and ship them, it is refreshing. I mean, this book cost me more to ship than it did to print, which it was still under like $13, I think, with both prices combined. So definitely a worthwhile purchase. I've had a couple of questions about this from people who aren't fully aware of what this book entails, and I'm going to try to answer those based off of my early observations. The first thing that I will say is, or do feel the need to point out, is that this does use the D&D 3.5 Open Gaming License, because it is produced in the back of the book, which I showed in the video where I opened the package that this was in. That said, it really very lightly uses that license. The really biggest thing that it uses it for is just the D20 mechanic itself, for basically just attack rolls. I'm sure there's more 3.5 Open Gaming License stuff to be found, deeper in the pages, but it really doesn't tie very closely to that version of D&D. So for those of you who are worried about like magic items, for example, just being like property after property after property being stacked on this one item, like a a +2 flaming burst, axiomatic, holy, keen, disrupting weapon, that's not in here. That's the first thing that I'll say as far as that goes, and I'll dive a little bit more into that in a moment. But this really does, and it says on the back here that this is old school, and it really does capture that old school feel. Now I still compare this to the D&D Rules Cyclopedia at the very base level, and I've had some people say that it's not meant to be a response to the Rules Cyclopedia, more a callback to like the Moldvay and Cook basic expert rules, which is totally fine, but those basic and expert rules were also sort of revised and part of the Rules Cyclopedia, so there are definitely some similarities there. One of the really cool things that they've done is they kind of fixed the demi-human races. So, for example, in the older versions of D&D that this is sort of based off of, you have your human classes of cleric, fighter, magic user, and thief, and then you have the classes of dwarf, elf, or halfling. So in these books, your dwarves, elves, and halflings can be other classes. They're not stuck with one traditional role that they have to adhere to, which is something that I think is sort of an improvement. Not that I hated the racial classes in the Rules Cyclopedia, although the halfling one didn't quite make sense to me. I thought they would have been better off as sort of a hybrid rogue. But in these books, they can be just about any classes. Dwarves still cannot be magic users, so they did carry that forward. And elves can still be dual class. They can actually have two classes at the same time, and by default they're the only race that can do that. They can be either a fighter magic user or a rogue or a thief magic user. And what's cool about that is, it makes the progression a little bit easier for them if they have the thief magic user, because the way that they would advance is you would add the experience point totals for both of those classes to reach level, level 2, level 3, level 4, and so on. They have to get the combined amount of experience. So one thing to note about this book is that if you play an elf fighter magic user, it's actually going to take you a little bit longer to reach second level than it did with the Rule Cyclopedia. Because in the Rule Cyclopedia, or the older versions of like the Moldvay basic rules, elves reached second level at 4,000 experience points. The fighter magic user in this one, fighters reach second level at 2,000 experience points, and magic users still reach level 2 at 2,500 experience points. So it's actually going to be 4,500 experience for an elf fighter magic user to reach that second level. So it's a little bit slower progression in this book. The race or the classes still have a similar level progression that they had in like the old school and even the AD&D settings, where after 9th level they stop rolling hit points. So they stop gaining hit dice. 9 is the maximum hit dice that any class gets, and then after that they only earn a set number of hit points. So the cleric, the wizard magic users get the lowest. So after 9th level, they only gain 1 hit point per level, and you stop gaining your Constitution modifier at that point as well. Thieves and clerics, I think, both get 2 hit points per level beyond 9th, and fighters get 3 hit points per level beyond that. This product still uses the sort of like a fighter or a combat matrix to determine what bonuses that you get to hit. So instead of determining what numbers you need to hit for specific armor classes, like in older versions, your level determines what sort of bonus you get to your attacks. Armor class, unlike the old school D&D, and this is probably another influence of the D20 system and the 3.5 OGL, is that your armor classes ascend as they get better. So instead of starting with a base armor class of 9 in this version and having it lower down to like 0, you're starting at a base armor class of 11 and you're improving as you go, with each armor providing a particular armor class instead of just an armor bonus. Similar to what we have now with 3rd edition, or 5th edition I should say. So your leather armor I think gives you an armor class of 13, if I recall correctly. Then you have chainmail, which is an armor class of 15, and then you have your plate armor, which I think goes up to armor class 17. And then your shields provide just a static +1, which is pretty cool. Spells similar, or function pretty similarly to how they did before. With them sort of just having similar descriptions to what they did in the older versions of like the D&D Rules Cyclopedia or the basic rules and things like that. So certain spells improve as you gain levels, and they don't really tend to cap them like they do with other versions of D&D. So for example, your Fireball does 1d6 per level of experience, but it doesn't say maximum of 10d6. So it's sort of like, again, the older versions, where in the Rules Cyclopedia, for example, Fireball can go all the way up to 20d6 because it doesn't, very few spells actually list a cap. They just all sort of share the same cap. In addition, going back, I guess, just quickly to the races or the classes, elves, dwarves, and halflings can all progress through all the levels. So you don't have level restrictions like you did before. They can all reach 20th level in their respective classes. So again, it's really, really cool. Something that I think is really neat about this is it's actually really easy to convert monsters from like the Rules Cyclopedia into the system and vice versa. Really the biggest thing that you have to worry about is their armor class, because this still uses the same saving throw system as those older versions of D&D. So you have saves versus death magic, you have saves versus petrification and polymorph, you have saves versus like poison and spells and breath attacks. So it still uses those same kind of things. Instead of having like fortitude, reflex, and will, you have those, those saving throw progressions, and unlike having just a bonus against a difficulty class, it's again the old school system where your level dictates what number you need to roll or greater in order to make a saving throw. So if your save versus magic or save versus spells is, say, 16, then you have to roll a 16 or greater to save on against attacks made by spells, instead of it being like you get a +3 bonus and you have to meet whatever the difficulty class is. So it gets rid of that whole situation altogether and goes back to that old school style. Going back to the conversions, the cool thing about the armor class system is the easiest way to get armor classes from, say, this into Rule Cyclopedia is you take the armor classes provided here, subtract that number from 20, and that gives you your armor class. So using the base armor classes, for example, in the Rule Cyclopedia or the old school basic rule set, the base armor class was 9. So in this one, your base armor class is 11. You subtract 11 from 20 if you're not wearing any armor, and your armor class is 9. If you're wearing plate armor, for example, your armor class is 17. Subtract 17 from 20, and your armor class is 3, which is what plate armor gives you in basic D&D. So it works really well, and the opposite is also true. So if you're unarmored in the Rule Cyclopedia and you want to convert your character to this, or convert a monster to this, then you subtract 9 from 20, and you have an armor class of 11, which is the base unarmored armor class for the game. So it works really, really well. The game just is, it really feels like a love letter to the old school versions of Dungeons and Dragons, and I absolutely love it. Magic items are handled in that old school style as well. So your weapons will have magical pluses, and they may do, like, you may have a +1 weapon that's +3 versus dragons, or +1, +3 versus lycanthropes, things like that. You have some weapons that can flame on command, but instead of it being like an extra d6 worth of fire damage, it just converts the sword's attack to fire damage. And then I think it does like an extra point per magical plus. So if you're doing like a d8 +1, it would be doing a d8 +2, but it would all be fire damage. So it handles magic items really, really well, and that's something that I definitely appreciate. Really, honestly, this is an excellent product from what I can tell, just from flipping through it at more of a cursory glance. And I think that for anyone who's interested in old school Dungeons and Dragons, but you're used to 3rd edition on, this may be the way to go. For me, I started with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, so I don't mind the way that things work in like the Rule Cyclopedia, for example. But, for someone who's brand new or someone who's never played that style, having, things like THAC0 and descending armor classes being better, I could see that being sort of confusing, at least initially. This removes that problem. And so again, if you're someone who has been playing the modern versions of D&D, but you kind of want to get a feel for what some of the old school styles of Dungeons & Dragons were, then this is an excellent product. And the best thing about it is that you can get the PDFs absolutely free. So the print-on-demand versions are sold at a very, very reasonable price. They're not profiting off of the production of these physical copies. The back of the book even, advises you not to buy it right away. So it's, definitely a different approach. But I do plan on buying more of it. It's just a matter of when. But so far, this is really, really awesome. I'm very impressed with this book, and I can't wait to be able to sit down and read it in a little bit more detail. But I just kind of wanted to get those first impressions out of there and just sort of answer a couple of questions that people have had about how the book works. And one of the biggest concerns was the magic items, if it was following the 3rd edition style. And again, from what I can see, the influence of the 3.5 Open Gaming License is really just that D20 plus a bonus, for your attack rolls. That's the biggest thing that I can see so far. I mean, not to say that there isn't going to be more to it as I go further in, but right now that seems to be the only thing that the D20 license really uses, or the only utilization of the D20 system from the Open Gaming License. So really impressed so far. I think this is an absolutely awesome book. I should have a full review up next week, though I don't see too much changing from the full review to now. This is really great. Again, I think this may be the best way to go for newer people who are interested in old school D&D, because they're going to get a lot of that old school feel, but the mechanics will be similar enough to what they know now that it's not going to be like learning a whole new system. Anyway, let me know in the comments below what your guys' thoughts are on Basic Fantasy, if you have it. I've got a lot of positive feedback from people, and I just look forward to hearing what others may think. And, do you agree that this may be the better way for newer people to experience older versions of Dungeons & Dragons? Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we will see you next time. Take care.